Welcome back to another edition of Whiteboard Wednesday, and I'm pretty excited about this particular session because actually just came from a client and was talking through this whole concept, and it's actually a conversation that comes up quite often, and it's really about the pipeline and how do you drive accountability and compensation and control and handoff throughout the process, and typically it extends just past the sales pipeline to the demand gen or lead qualification role, and certainly into the marketing pipeline. So I thought I'd walk through all that. I'll apologize because my sales pipeline over here is probably not the best of designs. But when we think about a pipeline, at least we have the basic shape. We think about the traditional concept of a sales pipeline here, which this is looking to represent, right? And every sales manager or sales vice president is familiar with that. I identify a number of stages, and I'll go through that in a little bit. But these days, you really have to think about pipeline in a broader context that encompasses not only the sales process, but also the marketing process and as appropriate, the demand generation or lead creation process. So I would call what we have up here a marketing pipeline, top of the funnel activities, and what I would call the middle is, in my world, really a demand gen or lead qual pipeline. And those of you who've visited my blog and seen some writing know that I'm a big fan of essentially segmenting the selling role from opening to closing and trying to maximize your closer and the value of your end-to-end sales people, if you will. So as we look at the pipeline, there's a couple ways to think about this. One is, just in terms of what is delivered at each stage and sort of the naming convention. And, a lot of time what we'll see is the concept of leads coming to the top of the funnel. And leads are sometimes a little too much of a generic term, but generally include things like site visitors, individuals like booth attendees, right? If you do trade shows and other things like that. They can also be generated from content marketing, via ebook or white paper downloads, right? And oftentimes these leads are progressed or treated or handled by marketing to the point where they can be considered a marketing qualified lead or an MQL. Another popular term as you get down the pipeline refers to the fact that as they become a sales ready lead or ready for a salesperson, we call those sales qualified leads. Now the challenge, of course, is how does marketing take a lead to the point where it is sales ready? There's a lot written about that and a lot of good marketing effort there, but I'm really of the belief that if you have a demand gen and lead qual team, you can quite significantly move the needle on your sales qualified leads. So in your demand generation pipeline, you're going to be looking at metrics and dealing with things like calls that they're making, outreach, appointments set, and then appointments held. Very important metrics. Ultimately, though, we really want sales, demand gen that is, to be responsible for creating, and I'll draw a little box right here, a new opportunity, and I believe also a scheduled conversation for the sales rep. So the real power in a demand gen team, in addition to rationalizing leads against the current database, etc., is that I get a lot of control over this point right here where my leads are actually converted into an opportunity. So this gets us into the main concept of a funnel and how things enter in the funnel. I'll just use my schema for how I look at a funnel. My first stage is always called a prospect, and I actually create that at 0%. My second stage I call qualify at 20%. My third, engaged, at 50%, and my fourth is committed at 80%. Sometimes I'll use an additional stage referring to the legal process, a lot of negotiating, but I really prefer a simple stage model here. And what you'll note is that the demand gen rep here is the one who physically creates the opportunity and hands it off to sales. The question that often comes up is, well, that sounds great, but how do you really ensure that, if this is the line of demarcation between demand gen and sales, how do you make sure that demand gen isn't just chucking stuff over the wall, and make sure that obviously that sales isn't sandbagging or not handling those properly? Well, I use the concept of the movement to a qualified op as a key metric in my process. And what that means is the sales rep will pick up the opportunity, which in a CRM system is going to encompass the concepts of timing and starting a clock and probability and value, etc. But really there's an inflection point or a decision tree at this point. The salesperson will pick up the opportunity with a scheduled meeting. One of two things will happen. Either the salesperson will advance the opportunity to qualify, or the salesperson will put it to closed lost. And opportunities that go from prospect immediately to closed lost, do my little trash can here, which I'm fond of, obviously present a stopgap or a safety valve or a way to check on the process and see what's going on. There's always two potential problems. One is that demand gen are pushing opportunities too quickly. The other is that sales is not adequately handling those opportunities and able to advance them in the pipeline. So really, when I have a waste rate out of my prospect ops where I'm failing to get a qualified opportunity, I got to ask why. Right? What was the reason? Is there closed lost reason that we use? And I'm a big fan of using closed lost reason codes, so you can determine what's coming out of here. So one is why, and the other is what percentage is this occurring in? So I can now measure this and understand a very important piece of my pipeline. And then the rest of the stuff through the funnel is pretty pro forma. Obviously, down here is my closed one. Often, I'm really good at managing sales around this area right here. So that's typically not my problem. Getting new leads is not my problem. It's really in this middle area to move stuff through the pipeline. So the next question that people often ask is what are the appropriate ratios? What do things look like here? And what are some appropriate measurements? And I'll try not to write too small, but starting from the top, an appointment ratio on a first pass basis is typically, this may be surprising, on cold leads 1 to 2%. Obviously can go up quite a bit from there based on qualified leads or based on trade show leads or referrals, etc. But 1 to 2% is not a bad appointment set rate for a lead qual team. In terms of appointments held, I'm typically looking to track that in the 80% range. I want 80% of my appointments to stick the first time, and obviously I want to schedule those. In terms of creating an opportunity, it's actually a bit of a two-part metric, because what I'd like to have is, for my initial appointments, I'd like 50% of these to be moving on to a second scheduled conversation with an opportunity created. And then I'm actually looking for, I'll say basically 80% of these prospect opportunities to make it to a qualified opportunity. So a lot of metrics in there, and I'll probably send out a typical spreadsheet used to calculate this stuff. In terms of the actual pipeline, I believe that an effective pipeline is going to run from qualified to closed one in the 20% range, maybe up to 25%. And really that's a reflection of obviously the percentages in the pipeline, but also the fact that not all deals happen the first time around, and really having an effective mechanism to capture all this closed lost stuff, if you will, and understand why it was closed lost, and then recirculate back into my marketing pipeline is critical. Harvard Business Review did an article recently on why deals don't close, and not surprisingly, oftentimes the real challenge is a no decision, a stalling of corporate will or momentum. So a lot of times being able to pull these deals back in gives you another bite at the apple. So I hope this is helpful in understanding both how marketing and lead qual or demand gen and sales work together, how these components hand off to one another, and also how you can measure that in a very effective way to get to get some good data and see if your pipeline is building to a successful month, quarter, year, etc. Hope that's been helpful, and as always, please leave comments and questions and look forward to responding.